Hello everyone, welcome back to another remote sensing lecture video. And in this lecture video I want to continue talking about our errors in change detection by talking about this idea of classification scheme differences. Classification scheme differences. And so the classification scheme, in case you don't remember or aren't familiar, this is that idea of how we defined our classes. And if you remember back to when we talked about training data, right, we said that one of the sort of requirements for training data was consistency. And that meant that every time you called something water, you were always calling the same thing water, right? You were never changing your definition of water to include a swimming pool if you weren't including it in other places. And so classification scheme differences, sort of put simply, are just differences in the definitions of classes between classifications. Right. And so I think this is hopefully a pretty straightforward concept. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but again, I just want to draw your attention back to that idea of consistency in classification training data to sort of highlight what we're talking about here. And what I want to do is I want to draw out two different examples. So let's talk through an example one. Right, so we have classification at time 1. So this is going to be map to map. I should specify, this is all map to map. Right, this is comparing a classification at time 1 to a classification at time 2. So let's take a quick look at example 1. So right, example 1, time 1. This is the first classification we're comparing. Let's say that your friend or you found a classification, a historical classification on the internet, or maybe you had a company, right? And that company had a classification scheme where water included swimming pools. Right, so at time 1, right, the classification scheme, the classification was done where water was meant to include swimming pools. Okay? Then at time 2, right, our second classification, maybe you did this yourself, maybe you hired a different company, maybe you had a different friend, maybe you used a different internet source, right? Either way, you had a different person doing the classification. And in their classification scheme, right, water, right, did not include swimming pools. Right, water did not include swimming pools as a definition, right, as a definition of the class in time 2. They made a specific choice not to include swimming pools as water. Okay? So now the question is, right, when you compare, so what happens when you compare these two, right? Compare for change detection. Right, we're doing a map-to-map comparison, right? We're looking at the different map classes. So by definition, right, if we look at a swimming pool, assuming the classifications are accurate, which we'll talk about in a second, right, assuming they're accurate, time 1 is going to say, well, that's not water. Or sorry, time 1 is going to say that is water, right, because their definition included swimming pools. Right, time 2 is going to say that's not water because their definition did not include swimming pools. So what happens when we compare these for change detection of a swimming pool? Right? By definition, these two map classes, right, the water map class, includes swimming pools here, does not include swimming pools here. So when we compare them, we're going to get change, right? Right, we're going to see change because this one says it's water, this one says it's not. We're seeing change, but is there really change, right? The swimming pool most likely didn't go anywhere. It's still the same surface feature, it's still a swimming pool. But did it, but again, based just on the definitions of water, right? Not actual change, right? Nothing fundamentally changed. The swimming pool is still there at both times, but just based solely on the definition of what water means here and what water means here, we're going to see change when there isn't change. Right. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, I think it's conceptually pretty straightforward, but the idea is that one definition included pools, the other definition did not. So assuming there's no errors, which we'll talk about in a minute, right? If we compare for change detection, we're going to see change even though the swimming pool didn't go anywhere. Let's walk through one more example. Let's talk about woody vegetation. Right. So at time 1, right, the definition of woody vegetation at time 1, again, this could be a company, this could be you, this could be a friend, right? You have some classification that you've pulled up. They included herbaceous, they included wetlands. As woody vegetation. Right, again, the definition of the training data, so when they were collecting their training data, right, they defined woody vegetation to include wetlands. Okay? This is just the definition that they ascribed. Right, at time 2, right, again, you've got a different classification scheme, a different friend, a different company, whatever. You've pulled up a different classification. This classification approach specifically did not include wetlands. In woody vegetation. Right, it did not include wetlands in woody vegetation. So what happens when you compare woody vegetation? What happens when you compare? Right, you look at a piece of woody vegetation that is actually a wetland. Right, so you're looking at a wetland. Right, this is going to say it is woody vegetation because it was included. This is going to say it's not woody vegetation because it's not included, right? The definition did not include it. So if you compare them, right, assuming that it's still wetland, right, assuming the underlying feature hasn't changed, right, we would see change. Right, we're seeing change not because the surface changed, but simply because the definition of this class included wetlands and the definition of this class did not. So anywhere that there would be wetlands in time 1, they will not be called woody vegetation in time 2, simply because the definition changed, not because the actual land surface changed. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, if you have any questions, please go back, rewatch the video, and as always, please reach out. Thank you.